In the golden haze of a late Victorian summer, nestled among the leafy outskirts of Kensington, stood an old brick mansion known to the locals as Wexley Manor. Its gardens were not merely groomed, they were alive, vibrant with color and mystery, as though the earth had whispered its secrets to the flowers and they had bloomed in response. Here begins the story of a curious girl named Clara Merriweather. Clara was born in the year 1866, in that very house of red bricks and tall windows. From the moment she could walk, she had a tendency to wander through rose gardens, across cobbled paths, even into the cool shadows beneath ancient oak trees. Her parents, both of respectable middle-class roots, doted on her in the peculiar way that Victorian families did, with affection, but from a certain emotional distance, leaving much of her upbringing to governesses and tutors. Her father, Edward Merriweather, was a barrister in the city, a serious man with a love for precision and arguments. Her mother, Rosalind, was an embroiderer of great talent, who found solace in watercolor painting during quiet evenings in the drawing room. Neither parent noticed, at first, that Clara was not like other children. Clara did not play with dolls. She spoke to shadows under hedges, stared for hours at the twisting patterns of snail shells, and once spent an entire afternoon sketching the whiskers of a hedgehog she had coaxed into her lap with bits of toasted bread. At 7 years old, she drew a fully detailed map of the garden, labeling it with names such as the Realm of Rose Knights and Dragonfly Pool. Her brother, Julian, 2 years younger and equally strange in his own right, followed her wherever she went. Their governess, Miss Elmira Shaw, a stern yet observant woman, once remarked in a letter to a friend, "Clara lives more in stories than she does in this world." It is both troubling and oddly hopeful. Inside the house, Clara was tutored in the typical accomplishments of a young lady: piano, French, sewing, and calligraphy. Latin and science were considered unnecessary for a girl, yet Clara found her own ways to learn. She would sneak into her father's study to pore over books on fungi and insects, pressing her nose into illustrations of mushrooms and beetles with gleeful fascination. It was the garden, however, that taught her the most. Wexley's garden was a sprawling labyrinth, with tangles of daisies and primrose, winding ivy, and a greenhouse filled with strange plants that Clara swore whispered when the wind blew. Behind a crooked gate at the far end was a patch of wildness ferns and nettles, old stones covered in moss, and a small brook that trickled like a voice from underground. This was Clara's favorite place, and she dubbed it the Hollow of Secrets. It was in the hollow that Clara discovered the first signs of something unusual. One morning, after a light summer rain, she noticed a perfect circle of mushrooms sprouting overnight. They glowed faintly in the dawn mist, their caps shimmering like silk. Clara crouched beside them, sketchbook in hand. As she drew, she heard a faint giggle, not Julian's, not her own. She turned sharply, heart pounding. But no one was there. That night, she couldn't sleep. She thought of the ring of mushrooms, the glint of dew on moss, the giggle in the wind. She tiptoed out of bed, journal in hand, and by candlelight, she wrote, "I believe the garden watches us. I believe something lives beyond the hedge. I saw a light under the willow tree today, breathe, flickering, like a winged lantern. I will find it again. The next day, Clara convinced Julian to help her set a trap of sorts. Not to capture, but to observe. They scattered crumbs, laid out shiny buttons, and placed Clara's old magnifying glass on a small wooden platform under the willow. For hours, they waited. Nothing came. Yet just as they were leaving, Julian swore he saw something shimmer in the corner of his eye, a blur of green and silver darting away into the leaves. That night, they heard a soft rustling outside their window. Clara opened the curtain to find her sketchbook lying open on the sill, a tiny mushroom pressed between the pages, one she hadn't drawn. Clara's world began to change. Over the weeks that followed, the children began documenting what they now referred to as garden phenomena. Strange tracks in the soil. Petals rearranged into perfect patterns. Stones stacked in impossible balance. The hollow of secrets became their sanctuary, and slowly, Clara's art transformed. Her drawings took on a magical realism: rabbits with waistcoats, frogs with walking sticks, foxes that read books by firelight. One morning, Miss Shaw found Clara asleep on her desk, her hand still holding a pencil, beside a picture of a mouse carrying a lantern through a hollow log. Below it, Clara had written, "They are real, even if only I can see them." Miss Shaw, instead of scolding, brought Clara a new box of paints. There was a bond forming now, not only between Clara and the garden, but between Clara and something older, deeper. She could feel it every time she placed her bare feet on the wet grass, every time a wind rustled the roses and seemed to whisper her name. Her stories were no longer just stories. They were maps, messages, invitations. One evening, Julian went missing for several hours. Panic swept through the household. He was found by Clara under the old elm tree, staring into a hollow where a soft blue glow pulsed like a heartbeat. When asked what had happened, he simply said, "They showed me their library." That night, Clara stayed awake, listening to the wind. It was a Wednesday morning when Clara first heard the voice in the tree. The rain had cleared, leaving the world soaked in silver light. Leaves dripped quietly, and the air held that damp, earthy perfume only the hollow could conjure. Julian was in bed with a fever from their last misadventure. He'd tripped over a root chasing a dragonfly he swore had scales, and so Clara ventured alone. She passed the garden's edge, over the little bridge they'd built with fallen branches, and into the hollow of secrets. There, beneath the old twisted willow, she found something new. A door. It wasn't there before. Or, perhaps more accurately, it had never been visible before. Made of bark and laced with moss, the door curved into the tree's trunk as though it had grown there. Clara ran her hand across it. Cold. Smooth. Ancient. And then the whisper came, not quite a word, but more than wind. A sound that slid into her ears like silk and settled deep in her chest. She froze. And listened. Welcome back. She stepped back, heart pounding. The whisper wasn't outside her. It had come from within the tree, or her own thoughts, she wasn't sure. Breathless, she sketched it, marking every curve of the hidden door in her notebook. But no matter how many times she blinked or tilted her head, she couldn't decide if it was real or imagined. The next day, she brought Julian. His fever had broken, and though pale, he insisted on coming. When they reached the hollow, the door was gone. In its place was a hollow knot in the trunk, rough and empty. "I swear it was here," Clara said, frustrated. Julian put his ear against the bark. "It's still here," he whispered. "It's just sleeping." From then on, the hollow became more than a hiding place. It was a portal, sometimes literal, always emotional. When the light hit the leaves a certain way, the world shimmered. Once, Clara saw the reflection of a squirrel holding a quill in the brook's surface, but when she looked up, it was gone. She began waking with ideas, not just stories, but names. Sir Thistlewisk, a gentleman badger who brewed pinecone tea. Lady Fernley, a mouse who kept a journal of the stars. Tiberwick, a toad who played the violin under mushrooms. Clara painted them feverishly, barely sleeping, barely eating. Her parents began to worry. Her governess, Miss Shaw, took her aside. "Clara," she said gently, "why do your creatures wear clothes?" "Because they have stories to tell," Clara answered plainly. "Would you listen to a rabbit without a coat?" Miss Shaw couldn't argue with that. That winter, Julian gave Clara a peculiar gift, a pebble. Oval and smooth, but glowing faintly blue. "I found it in the hollow," he said. "It was warm when I picked it up. And I think it hums when I sleep." Clara tucked it beneath her pillow that night. The dreams began almost immediately. She dreamt of tunnels beneath the garden arched with roots, lit by glowing fungi. She saw herself walking beside a fox in a waistcoat who smoked lavender from a carved acorn pipe. He said nothing, but pointed to a wall of drawings, her own drawings, sketched into the roots themselves. She awoke with tears on her cheeks. After that, Clara began writing letters, not to people, but to them. She left folded notes under stones in the hollow. "Do you remember the toad with the lantern? Would you show me the hidden brook again? I won't tell anyone. I promise." Some were taken. Others were returned with tiny paw prints in ink. And then one day, Clara found a reply. It was written on the back of a birch leaf, the letters impossibly small but clear. "You already walk among us, Clara Merriweather. The door opens when you stop looking for it." From then on, Clara didn't seek the door. She let the hollow find her. She began recording not just creatures and stories, but rules. Laws of this hidden world. Only children could see clearly. Grown-ups forgot. Dreams and art were the only reliable maps. And perhaps the most important, the more you shared their stories, the more real they became. By spring, Clara's room looked like an enchanted studio. Sketches of squirrels with spectacles, mice in carriages, frogs playing violins. Her parents dismissed it as a passing fancy. But Miss Shaw, who had begun leaving out extra watercolors for her, was no longer so sure. One afternoon, Julian came bursting into Clara's room. "They answered," he gasped. He held out a folded parchment. On it was a poem. "In root and stone, in moss and stream, we hide within your waking dream. One day soon, you'll see our town, when silence falls and moonlight's crown." Clara knew what they meant. She'd felt it for months, that pull, that invitation. She packed a small satchel, journal, pencils, a biscuit or two, the glowing pebble, and a jar for specimens. That night, she and Julian crept into the garden, hearts hammering. The hollow pulsed with quiet anticipation. And as moonlight spilled over the grass like a silver tide, the door opened. Clara didn't remember stepping through the door. One moment, she stood beneath the willow in the hollow of secrets, clutching Julian's hand beneath the silver wash of moonlight. The next, she was walking down a corridor made entirely of root and earth, the walls breathing faintly as though alive. Moss lined the passage like green velvet. Ferns sprouted from corners, and strange glimmers of bioluminescence blinked in the distance like tiny stars caught underground. Julian walked quietly beside her. He didn't speak, but his hand trembled with excitement and fear in equal measure. Suddenly, a soft tap, tap, tap echoed down the tunnel. Clara froze. The sound grew louder, accompanied by the faint clinking of metal, until out of the shadows stepped a creature so peculiar and graceful that Clara felt her breath leave her chest. It was a fox, but not like any fox she had ever seen. This one stood upright, nearly as tall as Clara. His coat shimmered with coppery hues, and he wore a dark green vest fastened with acorn buttons. Around his neck was a silver chain that led to a pocket watch still ticking, and in his paw, he held a delicate lantern glowing with soft golden light. "Good evening, Miss Merriweather," the fox said, bowing slightly. "And Master Julian. We've been expecting you." Clara stared. "How do you know our names?" The fox tilted his head. "Why, you've written to us. You've drawn us into existence. We are your letters made living." Julian's mouth opened, then closed. He finally said, "Are you Sir Thistlewhisk?" The fox chuckled. "A common mistake. No, no, Sir Thistlewhisk tends to the tea garden. I am Elodran, keeper of the library." Clara stepped forward. "Library?" Elodran gestured with his lantern. "Follow me." They walked deeper into the earth, until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, one that seemed to defy all logic. The ceiling rose high above them, webbed with glowing roots. All around the chamber were shelves carved from tree trunks, filled not with books, but leaves. Each leaf shimmered with runes and drawings, some still moving, as if alive. Moths with glassy wings fluttered about, lighting the room in shifting color. "This is the library of roots," Eladrin said, his voice low with reverence. "Every tale that has ever been whispered to the wind, every story painted by moonlight, every forgotten dream left in a child's notebook, they live here." Clara stepped forward, eyes wide. She reached for a crimson leaf etched with golden ink. As her fingers brushed it, a tiny image unfurled, an owl wearing spectacles, perched at a desk, muttering translations in ancient tongue. Julian touched another leaf and gasped as it revealed a parade of frogs in uniforms, marching across lily pads beneath a thunderstorm. "But I made some of these up," Clara whispered. "Did you?" Eladrin smiled. "Or did you remember them?" "What do you mean?" Elandrin's eyes glinted like amber fire. "Stories do not always come from within us, Clara. Sometimes, they pass through us. You have always been a listener. A seer. Your kind are rare. That is why the door opened for you." Julian leaned in. "Can I be a listener too?" Eladrin regarded him kindly. "You already are. But your gift lies in memory. Yours is the heart that keeps." As they explored the library, Clara noticed a section that seemed dimmer, quieter, almost asleep. The leaves here were cracked or curled. Some glowed faintly blue, like dying embers. "What's this part?" she asked. Elandrin's face darkened. "These are stories at risk of being forgotten. Stories unshared, unspoken. If no one remembers them, they vanish." Clara's heart sank. She thought of all the pictures she hadn't finished, the tales she had begun but never wrote down. What happens to the creatures in those stories? "They fade," he said gently. "They return to the root. But if someone remembers, if someone tells their tale anew, they may live again." She felt a shiver, not of fear, but purpose. Then Eladrin turned to her, his lantern flickering with sudden urgency. "There is more you must see." He led them through a narrow passage lit only by the lantern's glow. The air grew colder. The roots here curled like claws, and ancient runes marked the walls. At last, they entered a domed chamber with a single stone platform in the center. Upon it sat a book enormous, bound in bark and ivy, its cover pulsating like a heartbeat. "This," Eladrin said, "is the Codex of the Forgotten Grove. It records the birth of the first tale, long before paper or pen. Before humans." Clara approached reverently. The codex opened on its own, revealing a glowing page filled with strange pictographs and a drawing of a great tree whose branches held stars. She touched it and the world fell away. In an instant, her mind filled with visions. A deer with wings galloping across moonlit meadows. A river made of melted crystal weaving between sentient willows. A child with ink-stained fingers planting seeds that grew into stories. And then a warning. Darkness. A blot. A void that consumed pages, names, and creatures alike. A force born from neglect, from silence. A shadow called the unweaving. Clara stumbled back, gasping. Eladrin caught her. "It comes slowly," he said. "But it comes. The unweaving feeds on forgotten stories. If too many fade, the doors close forever." Julian looked frightened. "What do we do?" Clara looked at her hands. "We write. We draw. We remember." Eladrin nodded. "And in time, you will lead others." As they left the chamber, Clara looked back at the codex. She didn't understand it fully yet. But she knew this was only the beginning. They returned to the hollow just before dawn. The willow's trunk was just a tree again. No door, no lantern, no fox. But Clara no longer doubted. Later that morning, she woke to find her sketchbook open and a new drawing, one she didn't remember making, Eladrin, smiling, holding up a glowing leaf. Beneath it were 5 words. "Remember us, and we remain." The next morning arrived shrouded in a strange stillness. Birdsong was delayed. The breeze, usually mischievous at that hour, had forgotten to tease the curtains. Clara sat at her writing desk, staring at the drawing that had appeared overnight. The fox, Eladrin, with a glowing leaf in his paw. The message was simple, but it echoed with weight: "Remember us, and we remain." Clara turned the page slowly and began to write. The root world exists beneath memory. It is not a place you find by accident, but a place you earn through listening. Each word flowed as though her hand was only following what her heart had already written. She wrote for hours, drawing maps of tunnels, naming leaves in the library, and creating tiny portraits of every creature she could recall from the dreamlike realm. Julian burst into her room just after noon. "They're still listening," he said, out of breath. "I left my marble collection in the hollow. This morning, I found one turned into glass, and inside was a lizard made of smoke." Clara blinked. "A message." Julian nodded. "There's more." It said, "The woven thread is unraveling. A tale has torn loose." Clara stood, her heart racing. "Then we need to go back." That night, beneath the same crescent moon, they returned to the hollow. At first, there was only silence. The grass glistened, the willow swayed, but the door did not appear. Until Julian whispered, "We remember." And the bark split with a sigh. This time, the tunnel was lit with floating bulbs of light, drifting like fireflies. They moved on their own, keeping pace, illuminating a path neither of them had walked before. At the end of the corridor stood a child. A boy perhaps 10 years old, curled up beside a curled vine, asleep. His clothes were old, tattered, mismatched. His hair was coppery red, his face dusted with freckles. A book lay open beside him, its pages blank. Eladrin stepped forward from the shadows. "You're just in time." His name is Aaron Mottleaf. And his story has gone missing. Clara kneeled beside him. "Gone missing?" Elandrin's eyes darkened. Some tales are written in memory. Others are woven into the leaves of the Rootworld. But occasionally, a story unravels so quickly it forgets itself. Aaron is one such tale. He awoke yesterday in the library's silent wing, without a past. Julian stepped back, nervously. "Is he real?" Eladrin replied, "As real as any of us. But right now, he's not whole. His essence is scattered pieces of his story drifting through the unwoven wilds." Clara looked up. "Then we'll find them." The fox tilted his head. "You're sure?" "I am," she said. "If we don't help stories return to themselves, what are we even doing here?" Eladrin gave a solemn bow. "Then your role must change. Clara Merriweather, Julian Merriweather, you are no longer mere seers. You are now Talekeepers." A hush fell over the chamber. "The oath is simple," Eladrin continued. "You must speak it aloud under root and star." He led them to a circle of ancient stones beneath an opening in the cave ceiling where starlight pooled. In the center grew a twisted vine blooming with tiny, whispering flowers. Their petals turned as Clara approached. Clara and Julian joined hands. Eladrin lit a silver candle made of leaf wax and said, "Repeat after me." Together, they spoke. "We are the hands that hold the page. The voices that give names to the wind. We keep what others forget. We restore what others leave behind. By root and rhythm. By ink and heart. We vow to guard the tales." As the final word left their lips, the vine glowed bright gold and wrapped a tendril gently around each of their wrists, leaving a faint, leaf-shaped mark, a sigil of their new role. Suddenly, Aaron stirred. His eyelids fluttered. He sat up slowly, blinking at them. "Where am I?" he whispered. Clara smiled warmly. "You're where your story begins again." They returned to Elandrin's chamber and opened the blank book beside Aaron. As he spoke, halting, uncertain, Clara began to draw. Julian added notes, sketching fragments from Aaron's speech. "I remember, a bridge. It was made of feathers. There was a lantern, someone whispered my name. Each phrase brought color to the page. Ink flowed of its own will, forming hazy images of a wind-blown bridge, a trail of cracked shells, a pale wolf with glowing eyes. Suddenly, the lantern in Elandrin's paw flickered violently. "Something's wrong," he muttered. The images in Aaron's book twisted. Ink bled backward. The wolf on the page howled, then vanished. "The unweaving is near," Elandrin said grimly. "We need to move quickly." He snapped his fingers, and the wall behind him peeled open like petals. A passage beyond gleamed with crystal light. "This is the path of lost threads. It will take you into the wilds where fragments of Aaron's tale remain." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Is it dangerous?" "Yes," Elandrin replied. "But stories worth saving always are." Clara turned to Julian. He nodded, gripping her hand. "Then let's bring Aaron home." Before they left, Elandrin placed a pendant into Clara's hand, a small glass orb with shifting ink inside. "Speak into it only when you forget who you are," he said. "It will remember for you." As they stepped into the path of lost threads, the hollow behind them faded. Ahead was only light, wind, and the trembling call of a story desperate to be found. The tunnel glistened like a web spun from starlight. Clara led the way, her steps cautious but steady, the glass pendant from Elandrin swinging against her chest. Beside her, Julian walked quietly, one hand gripping a map they were sketching on the go. Aaron followed behind, his eyes wide and distant, as if pieces of him were still scattered in winds they couldn't yet feel. They were now within the unwoven wilds, a borderless labyrinth of memories detached from their source. The walls changed color with each breath. Paths split without warning. Time stretched and folded like fabric. It was a place where names could be lost and thoughts could repeat forever. Their first sign of something familiar was a sound of faint lullaby drifting through the fog. "That melody," Aaron murmured. I know it." They followed the sound until they reached a clearing where the fog parted to reveal a carousel spinning slowly, eerily, with no one riding it. Horses carved from driftwood blinked as they passed, and music played from an unseen box, slightly out of tune. Clara approached one of the horses. Beneath its mane was a plaque. "The first birthday, forgotten." As she touched it, a memory surged, not her own, but Aaron's. He was a toddler, wearing a crooked paper crown, laughing as a spinning lantern cast shapes across a nursery wall. There was cake, a toy badger, a voice humming that very tune. Then, silence. The image fractured and scattered like leaves. "Don't look too long," Julian warned. "It tries to trap you in loops." They hurried past the carousel. The air changed. The fog deepened. Soon, they arrived at a field made entirely of floating doors. Hundreds of them. each bobbing slightly, suspended upright with no walls to hold them. They spun in gentle circles, some cracked open, others locked. Julian whispered, "They're memories, aren't they?" Clara nodded. "Fragments of stories. Probably not just Aaron's." One door glowed faintly blue. As they approached, it creaked open on its own. Inside was a room silent, dim, filled with feathers drifting through the air like slow snow. At the center stood a boy with red hair, back turned to them. "Aaron." Clara called softly. The boy turned. His eyes were hollow. "Which version of me are you?" he asked, voice echoing strangely. Clara stepped closer. "We're trying to help you remember." The boy tilted his head. "What if I don't want to remember? What if remembering hurts?" Julian spoke up. "Not remembering can hurt too." The ghost Aaron stepped forward, and the room flickered. The feathers fell faster. The lantern in Clara's pendant began to hum. "He's splintered," she whispered. "We're seeing a shard." Suddenly, the room cracked like glass. The ghost Aaron screamed and lunged, but Clara thrust the pendant forward. A thread of light extended from it and bound the phantom. As it pulled the shard into itself, Clara fell to her knees. Aaron gasped behind them. I remember the lantern now. My mother gave it to me when I was afraid of the dark. It had fireflies trapped inside." He looked down, stunned. "I haven't thought about that in years." Clara smiled through her exhaustion. One memory restored. They pressed onward. The next trial came not in the form of fear, but temptation. A bridge made of letters stretched across a canyon of mist. The letters rearranged themselves beneath their feet with every step. On the other side stood a figure clad in silver vines. "Talekeepers," the figure said, voice melodic but wrong. "Why rebuild a tale that chose to unravel?" Clara stood firm. He didn't choose. He was forgotten. And you think memory alone redeems a broken tale? The figure stepped forward, revealing a hollow where its face should be. Let him fade. Write new stories. Create new names. The old ones rot beneath too much light. Aaron stepped past Clara. No. His voice was strong. I may not remember everything yet, but I remember this: every story deserves a second chance. Even mine. The vine creature shrieked. The bridge began to crumble. Clara and Julian grabbed Aaron's hands and ran. Letters beneath their feet crumbled into wind. Just as they reached the edge, Julian threw his map back, unfolding midair and catching the wind like wings. They landed hard on the other side. panting, shaken, laughing. As they stood, Clara noticed something had changed. Aaron's hair glowed faintly golden. Around his wrist, a vine mark like hers and Julian's had appeared. And in the sky above, stars blinked as if in approval. Elandrin's voice echoed faintly in the wind. He is becoming a talekeeper. A tale reclaimed rewrites itself. They camped in a glade that night, Clara drawing, Julian sketching maps from memory, and Aaron quietly recounting small things he was now sure of, the scent of pine smoke in his childhood home, the name of his first storybook, the way his cat blinked with both eyes at once. Before they slept, Clara whispered into the pendant. We found the first thread. He's coming back to himself. The pendant warmed. But far beyond the glade, deep in the rotting edges of the wilds, a darker force stirred. The unweaving had felt the ripple of restoration. And it would not sit quietly for long. At first, there was only the wind. Thin, whistling through the twisted roots and hollow trunks of the unwoven wilds. It carried no scent, no warmth. It whispered like a forgotten name, half remembered, half dreaded. Clara awoke with a start. The fire they'd built the night before had gone out, though she was sure she had fed it before sleeping. Julian was already up, tracing runes into the soil with a stick. Aaron sat close by, staring at his hands. There was something different in his eyes now, like a lantern had been lit behind them. We're close, he murmured. Clara nodded. To the last memory. No, Aaron said slowly. To it. Julian looked up sharply. You mean the Thread Eater? Aaron said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. They packed quickly and resumed their journey. The wilds changed as they walked. What had once been fog became ash. Trees leaned in, bent by some unseen gravity. The ground was littered with broken inkstones, snapped quills, and torn parchment, the remains of forgotten stories, digested and discarded. And then, they heard it. Not footsteps. Not breathing. But tearing. A rhythmic, awful sound, like paper ripped slowly, deliberately. The air around them darkened. Suddenly, the sky blinked. No, not the sky. A massive eye, lidless and stitched with silver thread, opened above them. The trees bowed away, and the wind fled in all directions. Out of the ground rose a form. It was neither beast nor human. A silhouette made of frayed pages, ink dripping from every joint, and tendrils of words spiraling off its shoulders like smoke. Its voice was not a sound but a dragging, like someone scraping a quill across slate. A new tale, still warm. How exquisite. The Thread Eater had come. Julian stepped in front of Aaron, holding the sketch map like a shield. He's not yours. The creature leaned forward, its shape shifting, warping. All untold stories belong to me eventually. You trespass on sacred forgetting. Clara held up her pendant, now glowing furiously. We are Talekeepers. We claim his story. It is being remembered. The creature hissed. Not fast enough. Suddenly, the earth split open, and tendrils of torn ribbon lashed toward them. One grazed Julian's arm, instantly erasing the sleeve from his coat as if it had never existed. Run! Clara shouted. They dove into a ravine, scrambling over roots and fallen branches. The thread-eater pursued, its body bending like smoke, reforming between trees. Clara reached into her satchel and pulled out a small ink jar one Eladrin had given her in the library. She flung it at the ground. The ink splashed upward and froze into a door. She pushed Aaron through. Julian followed. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing them in a chamber of silence. They were in a memory vault. Walls lined with glowing leaves. Above them, a stone ceiling shimmered with inscriptions from every tale ever nearly lost but saved in the final moment. The air buzzed with voices not heard aloud in centuries. Clara collapsed to her knees. He's stronger than I thought, she gasped. He eats memory. Erases it. If we fail here, even Aaron's name could disappear. Aaron looked down at his hands. Maybe it's better. If I'm so easy to forget, maybe I wasn't worth remembering. No. Clara shouted. Her voice echoed across the chamber, and several leaves on the wall glowed in response. You are not a mistake, Aaron. You are a story that's still being written. And every story has pain but also choice. You can choose to live again. Julian touched the wall. This vault, it responds to voices. To will. Clara stood. Then let's write his ending. They began crafting words and pictures together. Julian sketched scenes of a floating lantern bridge, a birthday carousel, a small fox hiding in a library. Clara narrated aloud, drawing the tale back into being. Aaron closed his eyes and whispered memories as they came: his sister's name, his favorite place to hide, the last story he wrote before it was lost. With each truth spoken, the walls pulsed. The creature outside howled. It was trying to force its way in. Cracks spread across the stone door. Clara placed her hand on Aaron's chest. Are you ready? Aaron nodded. I want to remember everything. Even the parts that hurt. Then it's time, she whispered. She took out her last page of sketch parchment and wrote, Here lies the tale of Aaron Mottleaf. Born of ember and ink. Forgotten once. Remembered forever. As the final word was spoken, light exploded from the pendant. The room shook. The door burst open, but the creature screamed as a wall of light surged outward, slamming into its form. Pages burned. Thread snapped. The thread eater writhed, shrinking, its limbs dissolving into paragraphs that folded in on themselves. "You are not forgotten," Clara shouted. "You are written again." With one final roar, the creature collapsed and was bound. Bound into a single black ribbon, now tied around the cover of Aaron's restored book. The wilds sighed. The trees straightened. The air cleared. Eladrin appeared moments later, stepping from a passage of root and gold. He looked down at the ribbon and nodded. "You've done what many failed to even dream." He turned to Aaron. "Your story is whole again." Aaron looked at his hands. "No," he said. "It's just beginning." The morning sun filtered softly through the branches as Clara, Julian, and Aaron emerged from the depths of the unwoven wilds. The air was fragrant with the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers, a sharp contrast to the shadowed silence they had just escaped. Before them lay the Garden of Retelling, a vast and wondrous place where stories, once reclaimed, were shared back with the world above. The garden shimmered with colors impossible to name, blossoms of shimmering parchment, petals inscribed with glowing letters, and vines that hummed with whispered tales. Eladrin stood waiting at the entrance, his lantern casting golden patterns across the grass. "Welcome to the final stage, Talekeepers." Clara glanced at Aaron. His eyes were alight with a mixture of exhaustion and wonder. "Is this real?" he asked. "As real as your story," Eladrin replied. The garden's center held a large fountain, its waters clear but filled with swirling words and images. Around the fountain, beings of all shapes and sizes gathered, creatures born from tales, both ancient and new. Clara and her companions stepped forward. They were greeted by a tall woman cloaked in ivy and stars, who introduced herself as Malus, the keeper of voices. "Your journey has bound you to the roots and branches of all stories," Malus said, her voice like wind through leaves. "Now you must share your tale, Aaron's tale, and the many forgotten ones, so they may live on in the hearts of others." Clara felt a warmth rise in her chest. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment stories leapt from shadows into light. Malus led them to a circle of stones inscribed with runes of memory and speech. "Speak here. Tell your tales aloud. But beware, every story shared changes, takes on life of its own, and sometimes, truth becomes legend." Julian stepped forward first, holding the sketch map of the path of lost threads. "I'll tell of the journey," he began, voice steady. "Of the carousel, the floating doors, and the terrible thread eater that devoured stories, but was defeated by our faith in memory." As he spoke, the stones glowed, and figures appeared, ghostly reenactments of their adventures, shimmering like light on water. Aaron followed, hesitating at first. "My story was lost," he said softly. "But Clara and Julian brought me back. They gave me a name. A past. A future. Clara took a deep breath and began to paint in the air, her brush strokes invisible but felt by all. With each motion, colors bloomed across the sky like fireworks, images of foxes, lanterns, and whispering trees. But the garden was not without its dangers. From the shadows beyond the stones crept whispers, thin, smoky tendrils born of forgotten doubts and half-truths. They slithered toward the speakers, trying to unravel the stories before they took root. Malis raised her hand. Protect the tale. Let memory be stronger than silence. Clara felt her pendant pulse. She reached out, weaving her own story like thread between the whispers. Julian and Aaron joined, their voices rising in harmony, chanting the Talekeepers' oath. The whispers recoiled, shrieking as they dissolved into mist. But Clara noticed one whisper that lingered, watching from the edge, a figure draped in darkness, its face obscured by a veil of ink. Who are you? Clara called. The figure smiled thinly. I am the scribe of lost voices. I record what memory forgets. Before anyone could react, the scribe vanished, leaving behind a single black feather that drifted to the ground. Clara picked it up. A chill ran down her spine. You will see me again, the voice whispered on the wind. That night, Clara dreamed of a great tree, its branches heavy with stories. But some branches were barren, pulled bare by unseen hands. She woke with a start. Julian was already awake, reading from a book bound in moss and twigs. We've won the battle, he said. But the war for stories is far from over. Aaron nodded. Every tale shared will be tested, changed, and remembered differently. Clara looked at her glowing pendant. We're not just tale keepers, she said softly. We are also storytellers, guardians, and warriors. The dawn spilled light over the garden of retelling, promising a new day and many new stories. The night in the garden of retelling was unnervingly silent. The stars above shimmered faintly, but the usual chorus of nocturnal whispers was absent. Clara, Julian, and Aaron sat around a low stone table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of their talismans. Each held a piece of the tapestry they had woven, a thread in the endless web of stories that connected their world to the Rootworld below. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the garden, extinguishing the lanterns and cloaking the stones in darkness. From the shadows emerged a figure more terrifying than any nightmare, the scribe of lost voices. He was tall and thin, draped in robes of shifting ink and parchment. His face was obscured by a veil of swirling letters that constantly rearranged themselves, obscuring his features and hinting at the endless stories he had consumed. Talekeepers, his voice echoed like the rustling of dry pages, you believe that by telling tales, you protect them. But stories are not static. They evolve, they decay, they vanish. Clara stood, her voice steady despite the chill creeping down her spine. Stories live in memory. We give them life by remembering. The scribe smiled, a slash of white teeth beneath the veil. And yet, memory is fragile. What happens when the tale you hold dear is twisted beyond recognition? When truth is replaced by fiction, and the storyteller becomes the lie. He extended a hand, and the garden shifted. The stones dissolved into a vast library of mirrors, each reflecting a different version of Clara, Julian, and Aaron. In each reflection, their stories were distorted, heroes became villains, memories turned into nightmares, and truths shattered into fragments. You must choose, the scribe whispered. Which version will you claim as your own? The tale is not yours until you own the narrative, the light, and the dark. Julian stepped forward, eyes blazing. We do not fear the shadows. Our stories are not perfect. They are real. The scribe chuckled. Then prove it. He gestured, and the mirrors shattered, pulling the trio into a vortex of spinning images and voices. Clara's heart pounded as she saw flashes of forgotten places, the willow in the hollow, the carousel of lost birthdays, the floating doors in the unwoven wilds. But the images warped her, friends betrayed her, their faces twisted into sneers. Aaron's memories faded into blackness. Clara clutched her pendant, drawing strength from the warmth it emitted. We are more than what you show us, she said aloud. We are the keepers of stories, the guardians of memory. Her words wove through the vortex like threads of light, stitching the shattered images back together. Julian and Aaron echoed her oath, their voices melding into a chorus that pushed back the darkness. The scribe screamed, a sound like tearing parchment, but he could not resist the combined will of the Talekeepers. Suddenly, they found themselves standing before a towering book, a grimoire of forgotten truths, its pages blackened but pulsing with latent power. The final test, Elandrin's voice came from nowhere. You must write your own story here. But beware, the pen is not always your own. Clara approached the book, quill in hand. As she touched the page, words began to flow, not just hers, but echoes of every tale told and untold, interwoven with new dreams and ancient fears. The quill trembled in her fingers as the ink spread like living shadow. Images formed on the page, a young girl wandering through the wild woods, a fox bearing lanterns, a boy searching for his lost self. Clara wrote faster, her heart pouring into every stroke. Suddenly, the quill resisted twisting her words, trying to rewrite her thoughts. The scribe's influence sought to corrupt the narrative, to bend it into something unrecognizable. Struggling, Clara closed her eyes and whispered, "This story is mine. Its light and dark belong to me." The quill stilled. Ink shimmered, then solidified into radiant gold. The grimoire accepted her story. The scribe shrieked once more and vanished into a swirl of letters that scattered like leaves on the wind. Breathing heavily, Clara opened her eyes. Julian smiled, "You did it?" Aaron nodded, "Our story lives." Eladrin appeared beside them, "The balance is restored. But the world will always need Talekeepers to stand between memory and oblivion." Clara looked at her friends and the glowing pendant. She knew the journey was far from over. Together, they vowed to continue weaving tales, preserving truths, and guarding the fragile threads of stories for all time. The garden of retelling had quieted. The stars hung low, casting silver light over the tapestry of stories woven into the earth beneath their feet. Clara stood at the edge of the garden, her eyes tracing the threads of glowing narrative snaking between ancient oaks and flowering vines. Yet, within her heart stirred a growing tension. Eladrin approached silently, his coppery eyes reflecting the soft illumination of the lantern he carried. "You have done well," he said quietly, "but the greatest challenge is yet to come." Clara turned, meeting his gaze. "What challenge?" Elandrin's face was grave. "The Weaver watches." At the edge of the garden, a figure coalesced from the shadows, a woman draped in cloaks of silver thread and midnight silk. Her hands wove invisible patterns in the air, twisting and binding the stories that drifted like ethereal smoke. She was the weaver of fates, the guardian of the very fabric that connected all stories, the root world and the world above. Clara's breath caught. The weaver's eyes, deep pools of shifting constellations, fixed on her. "You hold the power to weave stories anew," the weaver intoned. "But every thread taken must be balanced by one given. To protect the whole, a sacrifice is required." Julian stepped forward, protective. "What kind of sacrifice?" The weaver extended a hand, and from her palm emerged a glowing thread, a single strand shimmering with all the colors of memory and dream. "To bind this thread into the fabric, you must surrender a part of yourself. A memory, a feeling, a secret you hold most dear." Aaron's eyes widened. "That's cruel." The weaver smiled sadly. "It is the cost of creation and preservation." Clara's mind raced. What part of herself could she offer? Her earliest memory of the hollow. Her secret hope to be remembered. Or the quiet fears that shadowed her every step. She looked at her friends, their faces a mosaic of determination and fear. The weaver's voice broke through her thoughts. "The choice is yours." Clara reached deep within her mind and grasped the memory she cherished most, the day she first met Julian in the garden, his laughter echoing beneath the willow, the sense of belonging that had filled her heart. She offered it. The thread accepted, glowing brighter, weaving itself into the tapestry. Suddenly, Clara felt a gentle warmth, then a faint hollow where the memory had been. Yet, something miraculous happened. From the void, a new thread emerged, one woven from the collective hopes of all the Talekeepers, strengthened by their bonds and shared stories. The weaver nodded, pleased. "You have learned the true power of storytelling. It is not loss, but transformation." Clara smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Together, the Talekeepers vowed to continue weaving tales, knowing that every sacrifice gave birth to new beginnings. The garden of retelling had grown quieter still. Under the velvet sky, Clara stood near the ancient fountain, its waters reflecting shimmering fragments of stories both told and untold. Julian and Aaron sat nearby, tracing glowing runes that rippled like liquid memory across the stones. But something was wrong. The air vibrated with an unfamiliar frequency, a hum that stirred the hairs on Clara's arms, sending a chill down her spine. From the periphery of the garden, a faint shimmer rippled, like heat haze on a summer afternoon, distorting the stars above. "It's the veil," Eladrin whispered, appearing suddenly beside them, his lantern dimmed in sympathy with the fading light. "The veil," Clara echoed. Eladrin nodded gravely. "A boundary between worlds, a threshold where stories unborn linger, waiting to find voice. But lately, it has been weakening." Suddenly, from the shimmering veil emerged figures, shadowy, translucent, unfinished. They were echoes of stories yet to be born, flickering between existence and oblivion. Clara stepped forward. "Can we help them?" The weaver's voice, soft as the wind, came from nowhere. "To save those echoes, you must journey beyond the veil into the realm of unformed tales." Julian looked uneasy. "Into the unknown." Aaron's gaze sharpened. "Into the place where stories are created, but never remembered." Clara squared her shoulders. "Then that's where we'll go." Eladrin led them to a gateway woven from silver threads and starlight, a portal pulsating with potential. As they crossed, the world shifted. Colors blurred and morphed. Sounds were distant echoes. Shapes coalesced then dissolved. They stood in a vast expanse of swirling mists, where floating orbs of light pulsed with possibility. Here, stories had no form, only raw emotion and desire. Clara felt the weight of infinite potential pressing upon her mind, the chance to shape reality itself. But dangers lurked. Among the orbs prowled the forgotten ones, creatures born of abandoned ideas and broken promises. They reached out with tendrils of despair, seeking to drag unwary souls into eternal silence. The Talekeepers faced trials testing their will. Clara confronted a vision of herself, lost and forgotten, fading into nothingness. Julian battled shadow beasts formed from his deepest fears. Aaron faced his fragmented memories, fighting to reassemble his own story. Together, their bonds of friendship and purpose forged a light that repelled the darkness. At the heart of the realm, they discovered a colossal loom where the weaver of fates wove the threads of all stories, guided by the Talekeepers' hands. Clara understood, to save the echoes, they must weave them into existence, granting them form and future. With trembling hands, they wove new tales, stories of hope, courage, and transformation. As dawn broke beyond the veil, the echoes solidified into bright new threads, joining the tapestry of the Rootworld. Returning to the Garden of Retelling, the Talekeepers felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight to preserve stories was eternal, but so was the power of storytelling itself. The journey back from the realm of unformed tales was unlike any before. As Clara, Julian, and Aaron stepped through the shimmering gateway, the familiar scents and colors of the Garden of Retelling greeted them, but something felt different, heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Eladrin met them at the threshold, his eyes reflecting both pride and worry. "You have done well to weave the echoes into light," he said. "But the true heart of the Rootworld awaits." He led them deeper beneath the garden, down a spiraling staircase carved from ancient roots. The air grew cooler and thicker, filled with the scent of rich soil and forgotten dreams. At the bottom, they entered a cavern so vast it seemed endless. Stalactites shimmered like crystal chandeliers, and the walls pulsed faintly with life. In the center rested a colossal tree, the eternal Yggdrasil, the source of all stories and memories. Its roots intertwined with the very fabric of the world, its branches reaching beyond time and space. Clara approached, feeling a surge of energy course through her veins. "This is the heart," Eladrin whispered. "The wellspring of all tales. But it is fragile." He pointed to a darkened knot near the base of the tree, where roots twisted chaotically, choking the flow of life. "The unweaving's shadow has spread here. If the heart is consumed, all stories will fade." Suddenly, the cavern trembled. From the darkness emerged a figure, neither friend nor foe, but a being of pure narrative energy. It introduced itself as Lyra, the Weaver's successor, tasked with protecting the heart. Lyra's voice was melodic yet commanding. "To save the heart, one must offer a sacrifice not of memory, but of identity." Clara's mind raced. Identity. What does that mean? Lyra explained, "To protect the Rootworld, you must sever a part of your own story, your true name, so the heart may heal." Julian gasped. Aaron looked to Clara, his eyes filled with both fear and trust. The Talekeepers knew this was the ultimate test. Clara stepped forward, the weight of her journey heavy on her shoulders. "I am willing," she said, voice steady. As Lyra began the ritual, Clara felt her essence unraveling, threads of her identity pulling away, merging with the heart. Pain and peace intertwined. But from this sacrifice, a new strength blossomed. The dark knot dissolved, light flooding the cavern. The heart pulsed vibrantly, restoring the flow of stories. Lyra smiled. "You have become the guardian of the Rootworld's heart." Though Clara felt incomplete, she knew her sacrifice had saved countless stories yet to be told. Julian and Aaron vowed to protect her secret and continue their quest. Together, the Talekeepers prepared for new adventures, knowing the roots of stories run deeper than anyone imagined. The Garden of Retelling lay bathed in golden light, the dawn of a new age for stories and those who cherished them. Clara stood silently beneath the sprawling branches of the eternal Yggdrasil, feeling the pulse of the Rootworld beneath her feet. Though part of her true name, the essence of her identity, had been woven into the heart, she was far from lost. Beside her, Julian and Aaron prepared for the next chapter of their lives, guardians not just of memories, but of the very fabric that bound worlds and souls. Their journey had been fraught with shadows, the unweaving, the thread eater, the scribe of lost voices, and each trial had tested their resolve, courage, and love for the intangible yet infinitely. Precious treasure, stories. Clara's eyes wandered to a delicate sapling growing near the base of the great tree. It shimmered faintly, its leaves inscribed with faint golden script. It was new, fragile, and full of promise, an emblem of the stories still waiting to be born. A soft voice broke the silence. You have become more than a tale keeper, Clara Merriweather. Clara turned to see Eladrin approaching, his lantern glowing warmly. You are the weaver of endless tales now. Your sacrifice has bound you forever to the Rootworld, but also freed it. Clara smiled wistfully. I feel both whole and incomplete. That is the nature of stories, Eladrin said. They are never finished. Each ending is but a beginning. Aaron stepped forward, holding a bundle of scrolls, their chronicles, their victories, their losses, and hopes. We have preserved countless tales, he said, but there are infinite more waiting. Julian placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. And together, we will keep weaving, protecting, and sharing. Suddenly, the air shimmered, and a new figure appeared cloaked in moonlight and stardust. She smiled, radiant and wise. I am Lyra, the spirit of new beginnings. The stories you have saved have awakened me. Lyra extended a hand, releasing a shower of luminescent petals that drifted over the garden. These petals are seeds of imagination, hope, and dreams. Wherever they fall, new tales will grow. Your work is eternal. Clara felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of peace and purpose beyond words. Together, they watched as the garden bloomed anew, flowers of all colors, shapes, and stories bursting into life. And far above, stars winked knowingly. For the tale of Clara, Julian, Aaron, and all tale keepers was not just a story to be told, it was an endless tale, woven through time and space, forever growing, forever alive. Epilogue. Years passed, but the garden of retelling never faded. Visitors came, children and dreamers, poets and wanderers drawn by whispers of a magical place where stories lived and breathed. Some said the garden was a legend, others claimed it was a dream. But those who truly believed could hear the soft rustle of pages, the laughter of foxes in waistcoats, and the gentle murmur of the Rootworld's heartbeat. And somewhere, beneath the ancient tree, the weaver of endless tales smiled, knowing that stories, like life itself, would never truly end. Title: The Talekeepers, Guardians of the Rootworld. Description: In a world where stories are more than mere words, the Talekeepers, Guardians of the Rootworld follows the extraordinary journey of Clara Merriweather, Julian, and Aaron, three gifted individuals chosen to protect the fragile tapestry of tales that bind reality and imagination. From a secret garden filled with whispered legends to the mystical library of roots, and beyond the veil into realms where stories are born and forgotten, they face ancient forces determined to erase memory and silence voices. Bound by friendship, sacrifice, and an unyielding love for storytelling, the Talekeepers confront shadowy foes like the Thread Eater and the Scribe of Lost Voices, navigating trials that test their hearts and wills. This epic tale explores the power of memory, the cost of creation, and the eternal dance between light and shadow in every story told. Will they save the Rootworld and ensure that stories live on forever? Join the Talekeepers as they weave the endless tale where every ending sparks a new beginning.